Welcome to another edition of the E-Talking podcast. I'm Stuart Garlick from eMotion Formula E, and I'm joined by regular guest Conrad O'Keefe from eRacing.net, and also, for the first time on the show, Mr. Dean Warwick, the greatest export from New Zealand since Brendan Hartley, I think we can agree, and presenter of the Regen E-Racing podcast. Before we begin, I've got to thank Dean because he was the guy who got me online with Transistor, which is a really easy way of distributing podcasts, and for me he's a great sign of how the Formula E community wants to encourage new content creators, and not trying to blow smoke up you, but you've been brilliant for me. So thanks, Dean, and thanks for coming on the show.
It's not a problem. That's quite some praise coming on the show, and thank you for having me on. I think one of the other exports, Mitch Evans, he's obviously going pretty well. So yeah, and I think in a tweet you said something about the Finn brothers. They're pretty. Everyone in New Zealand knows their songs. So yeah, high praise.
So let's begin with the news from last week, which depressed me deeply. Last Thursday, they announced that Formula E and the FIA announced that next season Nissan E-Dams would not be allowed to use a twin-motor powertrain, which was their big differentiator this season. People believe it's one of the reasons why they've been phenomenally quick in qualifying, although, of course, they haven't converted that into a race win. And in a previous podcast, I think it was edition number 2, Hazel Southwell explained to us the reasons why it works so well. It's apparently to do with a flywheel like a hairband. But we've got a problem now because Formula E has for the first time banned some powertrain technology. The powertrains are the only things that can be different in a Formula E car, and they were the road-relevant thing that you could convert over to a road car in terms of energy storage, in terms of energy usage. Now, chaps, there's a few issues around this. The rumours coming out of Formula E from eRacing 365 and Sam Smith, who's been covering this, are that the teams felt that Nissan's second power unit was being used for more than energy storage. So there is a potential controversy there, but what do you think of the general principle of banning stuff in Formula E? I'm not a fan, but what do you think? Let's start with Conrad.
I'm not generally a fan to see either, because I like to see progression in the technology in Formula E, especially when you consider that there's quite a lot of standardised parts. It puts more emphasis on developing what obviously you can touch and what you can make better. In this case, there's definitely advantages to be had. Nissan, I believe it was in Santiago, one of the drivers commented on the advantage that they had there, that it was like a rocket on the straights or something like that. It was a significant quote at the time. And they've definitely been making use of it in qualifying, where single lap pace is of the essence. In the races, they've not really been able to hook it up for multiple reasons. Not necessarily down to the twin MGU or any major faults with that. It depends on how other teams take to it and how they adopt to it. And there's a few arguments that can be made about it, in that if the technology is allowed to grow, while Formula E cars, the Gen 2 machines in particular, are still on street circuits, are still, you could say, hemmed in, a little less powerful. If they grow beyond their means with technologies like these, it could put the championship in a bad situation in a few seasons. I'm not particularly sure it'd get to that point. I'm quite iffy on whether it needed to be banned or not, but if other teams don't adopt it, then it'd definitely create some disparity that probably be bad for the show.
Yeah, Dean, obviously we weren't inside the FIA World Motorsport Council meeting, but this seems like a trip back to the bad old days of Formula One, when they used to ban stuff for just being fast back in the 70s, doesn't it? Or would you agree?
Yeah, I've got to agree. I think Conrad's points are pretty on point. I think we want to see innovation at the end of the day, and just because one manufacturer's out leading, doing something different, trying things, and that's important, it just gets banned. the chasing pack decide that it's too far ahead, instead of going down that route themselves. So a lot of manufacturers have tried the twin MGU sort of setup, but yeah, I think why not go the innovation route, open it up a bit more, and let the technology decide who's got the quickest car. The teams, they pay enough to be in the sport. Why not?
Yeah, by the time this podcast goes out, I will have written and posted about this, but there is a counter argument, which is that you've got to protect the small teams, because Formula E began in Season 1 with teams like Neo, Next EV as it was then, Dragon, and the rest as front runners. And as time's gone on, and Venturi as well to an extent, and as time's gone on, they have found themselves having to spend more and more, and in the case of Dragon and Neo, move further and further back while the big OEMs come in. Now, obviously, you can't have protectionism. You can't just have them running at the front regardless of their performance gap. But there is an argument to be made, isn't there, that to protect the teams on smaller budgets, you can't necessarily have the technology arms race that you would see in other formulae. Or, Dean, should we disagree with that?
I think that's a good point, but we've seen 8 winners this season, so there's definitely the competition there. I agree with Neo and Dragon. They're both struggling to pick up points, but I feel like there's some of that argument as well that's valid. Yeah, I'll go with that.
I think where either situation they go with this, whether it's banning it or not, both can be linked to the troubles of Formula 1, because, as you say, if you ban technologies, it's like when the Brabham fan car was taken away after one race. I mean, it wasn't actually banned, but they knew it would be in a matter of time. So Brabham decided to get rid of that design. Plenty of other things we've had. There was one in 2014 to do with the suspension. Can't remember the acronym for it, but I remember it was a fairly big deal at the time. Things like that, even recent. But then there's the other way, that if you allow this progression to continue, that's another variable that can fall into the hands of larger manufacturers, and they can make much, much more use out of it than what teams on lower budgets can. And as we've seen, a recent complaint with Formula 1, and a major part of the reason why the sport's struggling so much for competitiveness is because of this. Privateer teams just can't keep up because there's so many different elements that large manufacturers can do a lot better with a lot more resources. And either way this goes, there can be parallels to what's going on with Formula 1 right now. It's quite a tricky situation for Formula E as well to find this.
Yeah, and actually, you could argue we all live in an F1 world, because to an extent, the controversies over the calendar, which we'll come to a bit later, are down to the troubles F1's experiencing, I would argue, and some have argued. But what is the future for Formula E as a non-spec formula? Because we've all had to bat back critics who've queried whether Formula E is really a spec formula or not. Obviously, the car's aero is controlled, and that's to save costs. So really, the only variables are the drivers and the thing that makes the car go. Are we looking at a situation potentially at some indeterminate point in the future where Formula E is a spec formula where the OEMs just build the power unit to a certain design? Is that ever going to happen, do you think, Conrad?
I think there's a possibility. Formula E does need to watch how far it goes into spec versus non-spec, what to decide to keep standard, what to decide to open up to any teams, because as we've seen with Formula 1, there's a lot of calls for standardised parts. And whether it's right or not, Formula E, for the time being at least, is going to be judged quite strenuously compared to Formula 1. And it's actually, right now as it is, I'd say it's in a positive light, because you've got so much more standardised parts, so much more competition, so much more, I feel, emphasis on how well run a team is rather than how much money you can throw at them. And right now it's incredibly enjoyable. We've already had the teething issues of an electric racing series coming to the fore, which has not entirely subsided, but it's definitely grown a lot more popular and a lot more people are receptive to it. The second bout of teething problems will come with how much further you open up these regulations and how much Formula E starts to change in front of our eyes. And there's always the danger that as they decide to open up more and more for innovation, there could be a silver bullet that ends up being turned back on them. I'm not sure if it'll get to that, to be honest, and I'm quite hoping that Formula E stays away from trying to compete with Formula 1 in terms of how much they open up, but I don't think it'll get to that.
Yeah, I mean, Dean, I would say the biggest problem with this powertrain ban, and I wonder if you think the biggest problem with the powertrain ban, is that it sets an awkward precedent, so that teams now feel they can raise their hands and get whatever innovation comes up next banned. Is this giving, in a way, the teams too much power? Because it's clear that, you know, this came from a majority vote by the teams, and you know, maybe as historians of the sport, we're used to the FIA dictating on these things. So is this giving the teams too much power?
No, I think it's probably fine to have all of the teams have a say. I think the main thing is just shutting down innovation and what would make Nissan really think about doing the extra work and creating these things instead of just going for the tried and true. So you've got to think, well, if it's going down one path, then all the teams have to be on board. So I think that's the good thing, but we don't want to shut it down too much.
Yeah, indeed. So perhaps you could argue then, and I'll throw this at both of you, but let's have Dean first and then Conrad. Could you argue that the mistake Nissan made was actually by being so fast and yet not actually winning any races this season? Will they view this as a major chance lost to do a Brawn GP in 2009 before the rules were changed, if you like?
Potentially, yes. I think their braking issues and software let them down. And we saw that with the various crashes from Roland and Buemi, and they should be, which they are catching up heavily now. And my co-host reckons that they will get third in the championship and overtake Virgin. And I think they probably should have been fighting for the championship with Buemi, Roland as well. You know, they both should be well up there. So it's unfortunate. But, this could have been their season, obviously.
Yeah, Conrad, your thoughts?
I'd compare it to a Brawn situation with the double diffuser. Fact is, they've just not made the most out of it. They've definitely stepped up to the plate in qualifying, apart from occasional moments like Buemi's crash in previous races. And they just haven't made the most of it. It's a collection of errors that this team just weren't ready to win a championship, and I think they'd serve better to see it as a bedding in period and not try and get too down about the fact that the twin MGU solutions going. I think it's probably best that they move on from that and just try to consider it a successful bedding in season rather than a championship lost, because God knows what that could do to morale within the team. But it's hard to look at a season like this and think there's a lot of teams that are fumbling the chances, and it's really been one of those seasons where it's anyone's for the taking if they just get the consistency hooked up at the right times. And that Nissan is fast enough. If they were a consistent outfit, they'd have a definite chance, and they've got the two drivers that are getting along with each other. There's no detonation in the team. They're not being wrecked from the inside, and they're both quick as hell. So this was an opportunity lost.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a tremendous season for them in many ways. When you look at the positives, I mean, Sebastian Buemi still showed that he's got the pace to win, even though he's been deeply unlucky, really. Ollie Rowland came in and did far more than I think even his biggest Twitter stans would have thought he could. And he has, as we've covered before, been the most impressive driver this season, probably. In the Independent Formula E Writers Hype Train Awards, my vote went to a different driver. I probably shouldn't spoil it now, but because Hazel and Rob Watts will be announcing that around the time, I think, of the Swiss E-Prix. But yeah, definitely Ollie Rowland is someone that you can get on the hype train for. Dean, how impressed have you been with Ollie Rowland?
I've been very impressed, actually. I've been singing his praises throughout the podcast this year. It's an amazing feat, really, to just come in minimal time in the seat beforehand, with Alexander Albon, being the de facto number one, and then Ollie getting the call up. So I think he's done really well. He's adapted quickly, but his record in the junior series, we knew he would be quick. We also knew that he was quite easygoing and would pick things up quickly. Wouldn't rock the boat with Buemi. I think he's a great guy, obviously, and a perfect teammate for Buemi to push him as well.
It's the kind of roller coaster ride that you only really get in motor racing, I think. I mean, you could argue that maybe coming from a wild card status to winning Wimbledon is possible in tennis, but there are very few sports where you can go from basically being out of work to being a potential race winner, aren't there? There
is. Yeah, you wouldn't see that in football or I guess that's a lot more of a team sport, but you don't see it very often, so that's great.
Yeah. All right, well, coming into next season then, the drivers who've been confirmed, they are Sam Bird and Robin Freins at Envision Virgin Racing, Felipe Massa and Eduardo Mortara at Venturi, and Jean-Eric Verne and Andre Lotterer at DS Techeetah. The only other driver who's been confirmed by any team so far is Neil Yarni for the Porsche Formula E team. Now, there must be a few drivers, obviously Sam Bird excluded, who must feel kind of glad that they didn't ink their contracts, because as the Formula E calendar for Season 6 was announced, we found that there were 3 clashes with WEC rounds. So all of those drivers who doubled up in endurance racing this season, I'm thinking of Jev, I'm thinking of Andre, I'm thinking of Jose Maria Lopez, etc., etc., they're all going to be out of a WEC job next season. So if I were them, I'd be looking at my potential earnings and I'd be cursing the World Motorsport Council. But Conrad, what do you make of those clashes? And Jean Todt says it was due to a misunderstanding, but I don't know, I find that hard to believe. Jean Todt doesn't misunderstand very much. Where do you think it's come from?
First off, I think it's quite annoying. It's annoying for us all to see clashes with different events, because if it means it robs us from seeing Formula E drivers in other races, it's obviously not fun to see. I'm not particularly sure why it's come to this. It's a very clumsy decision, and I'm struggling to get my head around it, because Formula E's calendar is quite expansive, and obviously there's quite a bit of time compared to other open wheel series when the events take place. It's not like Formula 1 where you're trying to cram a race in every fortnight and you've not really got much room to manoeuvre. And they've been doing a fair enough job of keeping events separated over the years. This is almost an inexcusable clash, because with the drivers, they want to take part in WEC rounds, and now they're going to have to prioritise what events they want to do. And as we saw with Sebastian Buemi when he did that in Season 3, that cost him the title. Well, you could say his mistakes cost him the title later on in the season, but even with those, if he'd taken part in all rounds of Season 3, he'd have won that. And that must set off a deterrent to other drivers that have got genuine hopes of winning a title in Formula E. Do I really want to risk missing a round or two for this event? Because even a strong title challenge that appears dominant fall down like a pack of cards in an instant. I think it's incredibly unfortunate and it's incredibly stressful for them, and it robs us of being able to see them in other sports.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, after the calendar was announced on Friday, and there was a sharp intake of breath across the internet, Dean. I'm sure that there was over in New Zealand as well. But looking at the calendar, it's a good calendar. The trouble is, we've got those clashes with the WEC, and you've got to ask. I mean, as far as I know, Formula E doesn't decide the calendar in a vacuum. It has to lobby for the dates it wants, and then the World Motorsport Council decides where it's going to be and when. Is this all, do you think, a power play?
Well, we have seen Formula E and Formula One on the same weekend, and it's hard for fans like us to follow it all and watch all the practice sessions and stay up to date with both. Yeah, we'll be similar with WEC. I think it's a real shame. I think as a fan, you want something on every weekend, but you obviously can't follow everything. We've all got jobs and time is we have a lot more of it, some of us, but not myself. Yeah, it's a big shame. Power play wise, I don't think they will favour Formula One too much. Are you talking about the Marrakesh potentially on that one, or
what I'm talking about really is the idea that it seems like, and obviously I can't read the FIA's minds, but it seems like they've said, look, we need to have a clash somewhere, and we'd rather have Formula E clashing with WEC than Formula One. Now, we don't know the DTM calendar next season. It's entirely possible drivers can double up in there, but lots of them don't have works OEM contracts and rely on the WEC for part of their income. And Formula E is only 12 weekends. So obviously, if you're a Formula E driver, then you do really need another drive, unless you're specialising.
It's a real shame, especially for the likes of Jev, obviously, as well. He'll be very unhappy. But yeah, there has to be some compromise. And I know I'm sitting on the fence here, but yeah, it's unfortunate that it's not with Formula One, and it is with a series that a lot of the drivers do race in as well. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Yeah.
And of course, one race that we're losing for next season is the race that we're going to for the first time, the Bern Prix this weekend. Last year it was Zurich. That was the first motor race held in Switzerland since the ban after the 1955 Le Mans disaster. Switzerland, I think, is the only European country to have ever banned motor racing. But Conrad, do you think it's a massive shame that Formula E is going to leave Switzerland after this season?
Definitely so. Switzerland has, as we've already seen, a fair few places where you can hold decent races. It'll be interesting to see how it goes in Bern. It was also obviously quite important historic event was the one in Zurich because of what happened in 1955. I don't think it's irreplaceable. I think that the Formula E calendar will be fine without it, but you still don't want to lose an event. And the problem is it starts to come into this, I'm not really quite sure how to describe it, but it's an incredibly topsy-turvy calendar is Formula E when you compare it to other series. Think of all the races that have had one or two events and disappeared from the calendar, ones that have popped up and gone away, like Monaco. Although I understand why that's the case, it alternates with the historic racing event. And then you've got different areas like Chile and Switzerland hosting different races in different years, like at different places. And I suspect for a casual viewer it can be quite hard to keep up with, and when you try to do comparisons between other seasons, it's incredibly difficult. Yeah.
I think the ideal for Formula E as a growing sport would be to have a fairly consistent calendar from season to season. Obviously, there are exceptions. Monaco alternates 1 year on, 1 year off due to the logistical issues there, partly. But are we? Are we, do you think, at the stage where Formula E is better off, Dean, with a constantly shifting calendar, or would you like to see something more consistent in future years?
Probably more consistent. I think it's a good range of tracks. Obviously, everyone's got their favourite, but there's definitely some really good ones in there. I'm looking at Tempelhof. I absolutely love that. Yeah, I mean, we don't want it to just be a rotating in and out, and consistency on the dates as well would be good. With so the WEC and Formula One can sort of move around it, and like you said, it's probably easier if it's consistent, and if Formula One has pretty consistent dates. Yeah, I really happy with the calendar. I'm looking forward to Seoul in Korea. Looking forward to London. That looks really cool at the Excel Centre. So yeah, there's enough new, but also those awesome tracks still making it in there.
Yeah, and there's still plenty to enjoy for a fan on the Asian side of things and a fan on the European side of things. I think in some ways this is now a true world calendar that we've got, because we've got a race in the Middle East, we've got a race in South America, we've got two races in the kind of Chinese sphere of influence. We've got South Korea there after they lost their Grand Prix a few years ago. United States, in some ways, they've gone a lot further than other formulae, and they've done so on a smaller calendar. But let's go through the calendar race by race then. So the first two races will be at Ad-Diriyah in Saudi Arabia. It's going to be a double header, and there is some talk of a night race. Now, Conrad, we've all seen Formula One night races and, of course, WEC night races that look fantastic on TV. How excited are you for a desert night race in Formula E?
Very. We've been due one for a long time, and night races just have an amazing aesthetic to them. I think it'll add something new to the Formula E calendar. I mean, obviously it'll be the first one, so it'll be Formula E's Singapore moment. Whether we'll get a race like Singapore's first, we'll have to see. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. And Ad-Diriyah, as we know, is a track that's fairly decent for racing. We saw quite a lot of opportunistic moves around the first couple of turns in the 2018 race. And yeah, I think it's one of the best places to have it, because you'll have the desert aspect along with it, so it'll be unique.
Well, yeah. Dean, how much did you enjoy the Ad-Diriyah circuit this season? I'd say the race itself wasn't as memorable as some others, but do you think that they had the right idea with the circuit? And what did you think of the general ambience from watching on TV of the first ever Saudi major motor race?
I thought it was really good. Yeah, everything seemed to go off without a hitch. The track looked good. I just going back to the night race thing, would absolutely love it. I would just, yeah, I would love to see that. It's an exciting prospect, and I really enjoy Singapore and Formula One. So that can sort of, yeah, take the place of that on the Formula E calendar. I think they did a really good job. I'm not sad that that's turned into a double header, and looking forward to seeing it again with the drivers actually knowing the track and having a bit more data on it. Yeah, for sure.
I'm actually looking at whether I have the resources to possibly travel there, because I think it would be such a great thing to. I mean, I've only been to the Middle East once. I don't know if either of you have been to the Middle East before, guys.
Nope.
No, just Japan and Aussie. Yep.
Yeah. Because I've been to the Middle East. I've never been to Saudi. I think it would be It would be a real travel experience. It would be something I could definitely write home about in every way. And I just think to be able to watch Formula E in the desert would be such a lot of fun potentially. And, well, I could learn a lot about a new country as well. Also, for any fans who want to go out there, Saudi does accept tourists, and flights to Riyadh are not prohibitively expensive compared to, Dubai or Abu Dhabi, certainly. And I'm told by people in the know that it's a cheap city once you get there as well. Certainly we're not going to be spending too much money on drinks because that's outlawed there. But it's supposedly a cheap city. There are Airbnbs. So if anyone fancies going out there, then let me know and I will be glad to join you. If indeed I can scrape together the cash. But let's look further down the calendar in a minute. Dean, do you have any races that you're also looking to attend in person?
I am actually. I'm got my eye on London. My wife has a friend that's just recently moved there as a nanny, so it's sort of she can go see her and I can watch the racing. So I'm trying to get over to London. So as soon as those tickets come out, as soon as the flights sort of start appearing, then potentially, everything is expensive from New Zealand. We're so far away from everything. So let's hope that round 3 is Aussie or somewhere closer.
It sometimes feels like that from Estonia, actually. In some ways it feels like the New Zealand of Europe, but never mind. Conrad, any races that you fancy attending or you're going to try and attend?
I'll definitely be attending both London races. There's a lot of people I know on Twitter as well who are going down there, so it should be quite a fun meet-up. And also planning on going to Paris if I'm able to, possibly even Rome. I'm not quite sure on those. They're a bit touch and go, but London's for definite, and I can't wait. Can't wait to see it.
Cool. Well, round 3 is a TBC. We think that could be Marrakesh. Presumably, Formula E is waiting to see whether Morocco fancies stumping up the cash again for a race next season, or perhaps they're looking at their options there. I really enjoyed Marrakesh. I think the city, at least from watching on TV, has a classical vibe. It's got it's got a real atmosphere about it that you don't get in other cities. And the circuit was actually pretty exciting and led to a race that was fairly thrilling from start to finish. But Conrad, would you like to see Marrakesh retained on the calendar, or would you like to see another race in that TBC space?
It depends what race it'd be, because in hindsight, I'd say Marrakesh for definite. It's not a track that I particularly want to lose, as we know there's been good races held there in the past. Like the last one that we had as well, with the 2 BMWs and the chaos that ensued with them. And all across the park, it was a definitely enjoyable race. And considering the way the races have kind of upped the ante in enjoyable racing across the season, for quite an early race to have such a good event put on was quite magnificent, I thought. But it depends what track it would be replaced with. We'd have to wait and see if... There's a few in the past that I reckon could do just as good a job, but I'd quite like to keep Marrakesh.
Yeah, I mean, you said a few in the past. Which ones would you like to see make a comeback?
I'd like to see Beijing. I'd quite like to see Beijing come back if that was possible. I quite enjoyed the first race there, as we know that was an intensely dramatic race. And Punta del Este, quite enjoyed that as well.
And I think a lot of people would like to go back to Punta. It's one of those places that I think Uruguay in general often gets overshadowed by Argentina and Brazil in terms of motorsport, but maybe not in terms of football these days. But it's always good to have a race in a different country. So Santiago is round 4. Again, liked the circuit. It was bumpy as heck, drivers said, and because of the excessive heat, they were cutting up the track. But it's next to Chile's biggest fairground. It's a lot of fun, and if you don't like the action, you can always buy an ice cream. Dean, you happy with Santiago? Happy it's staying?
I am, yeah. No, Santiago was a real test for the drivers with the heat. It was a real test. Hopefully next season it's not that hot. I'm sure they a roaring trade on ice creams, and I'm sure that'll continue. But yeah, it's a great track, and we don't want to see that one go off the calendar.
Yeah. Mexico City, everyone's favourite track named after two brothers, the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. It's a different layout to the Formula One track, but it's proved pretty popular with fans. I like it because I like the idea of Formula E racing on hybrid circuits. I don't necessarily subscribe to the view that they all need to be completely in cities. Conrad, you pleased that Mexico is inked, and did you enjoy the race this season in Mexico?
Definitely. It's arguably the best event on the calendar, I think, and it definitely served up what I think was the best race in hindsight. And I think it's incredibly good that it's staying on the calendar because it offers something a little bit different. It's not slap bang in the middle of a city. It's a Formula One venue that's been repurposed, and I'm a sucker for the stadium section in particular. I think it's absolutely magnificent to have a stand like that where a lot of fans can sit around and see the same piece of tarmac and be together and be able to cheer. And I think more of that kind of stuff is what Formula E needs to create even more passion for the sport. And I don't think I necessarily subscribe to the fact that it has to stay on street circuits. I think it's for the best right now. And I think that street circuits need to be an intrinsic part of Formula E's DNA because that's part of where the uniqueness of the series comes from. But occasionally just dabbling out of that and having purpose-built circuits from time to time, I think could be a great addition to the series.
Yeah. Dean, we're over to your neck of the woods next, at least in terms of like 5,000 miles. Hong Kong and China. Hong Kong is going to be on the same circuit, the Hong Kong Central Harbourfront Circuit, which I think people have enjoyed over the years. But the China race, well, it's a toss-up between two. It might be Sanya. It might be, I hope I'm getting this right, Xi'an, which is the historic home of various dynasties over the last few thousand years, and which obviously has a bit of an old town vibe, which might hark back to Algeria a little bit. Let's start with Hong Kong. Are you pleased that it's staying? And also, which Chinese race would you rather have, Dean?
Hong Kong, I didn't love it, I've got to say. The track could be better. I think, Sanya was good. Something new, something exciting. The location is just incredible. Sort of the Hawaii of China. I would like to see something new. So, if Hong Kong was replaced with Sanya and we get the new race slotting in at number 7, that would be good in my eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe the issue with Sanya is that, particularly with politically with the way China is, it can seem a bit elitist. It's like the Sochi of China, isn't it? It's this beach resort on the far southern tip, and ironically, a lot of Russian tourists go there for the reason that it's the Sochi of China. Do you think that this plan to take it inland potentially for round 7 is kind of a plan on China's part to bring Formula E closer to most people?
Well, that's their aim, isn't it? So you've got to think instead of putting it on a little man-made island, bring it to the people where more people can see it, more people can experience it, and that's only a good thing. So I think if it is Xi'an, then awesome, and I want to see it.
Yeah. Also, it might have a few spin-off benefits because I'm told that in inland China, or at least central China, does have a bit of a major pollution issue. So I have no doubt that the local government will sort that out before any Formula E race. So I suspect that again, Formula E might actually come to an area that needs cleaning up and clean it up quite significantly. But let's see. So then we come to the European season, and it's a truncated one this time. We've got the street circuit in Rome through those monolithic fascist buildings from the Mussolini era, all very un-Rome and very not what you see on the postcards. And then the Paris street circuit. Now, obviously Sophie's on your podcast, and she came on our show and talked about what it's like to be a spectator in Paris. Didn't necessarily speak in glowing terms about the way that it was organised, but she said that she enjoyed the track, even though it was obviously raining and hailing. From your point of view, Conrad, Rome and Paris, what are your views on the circuits? What are your views on the action that we got in the races?
I think Rome's a good place to hold a Formula E circuit. I don't think it's the most ideal place and makes the best use of the city. I know there's logistical issues that you can't hold it anywhere you want within the city, but I reckon they could have done better with it. And as you say, the buildings and the historical context behind them is not what we want to see and not what we want to advertise. But yeah, I think Rome as a city is a good place to hold it. We've had good races there in the past. And Paris, I mean, what a race we had this season. Like, in terms of pure drama and what's going on. If I weren't so engrossed in Baku in Formula 1, I wouldn't have been able to take my eyes off that race. Paris, I think, is a beautiful place, and it's the closest Formula E's come, along with tracks like Hong Kong and Monaco, when it's around, that are instantly recognisable, have a lot of history within the series behind them, and you can point to them and recognise them. Again, coming back to that point, it's great when you have tracks that you can recognise from this point in time, or you kind of grow along with them, and then you can start having a favourite track on the series without wondering, wait, is it going to be cancelled this year, next year? I think that, yeah, Paris definitely needs to stay in the long term, and I'm glad that it's staying for this season.
Yeah, I mean, Dean, perhaps Paris in particular showed the importance of having vistas and views that you can show people overhead on TV. Do you think that, Paris, because of those magnificent views of the Eiffel Tower and obviously the Louvre, which they drive past, is it a must-have on the FE calendar?
For me, no, but it's definitely beautiful. There's no doubt that it's got the vistas, got the scenery. Yeah, I mean, Paris as a track is just a great track. It was a great showing from Frains to hold on, and it's easy to have a narrative there, I think. So some tracks you sort of think, oh, this might be might be a little bit of a I don't know, a train or a procession at stages around the track, but definitely not with Paris. And I think it's one of the ones that, yeah, I'm keen to keep on there for as long as possible.
So why would you say that it's not a must to have on the calendar? Do you think that there are any indispensable races on the Formula E calendar, or could we replace any of them?
Yeah, it's not a must, but I want to see it stay. I think most of them, you know, they don't need to be on there, but I do want to see Berlin stay, because I think that's one that can sort of grow with the cars, because it's at an airport, and you can just create the track however you feel, and that can sort of morph with the cars when they've got more speed in Gen 3, and so that's one that can really grow with the series. But, I think they're great tracks. The FIA's done really well to get them all and have them come on board, but, I don't think they're absolute must keep any of them.
Sure. Next one on the calendar, round 10, is going to be the Seoul E-Prix. This is a new circuit, and I'm very excited about it because I think motorsport needs South Korea. It's such a massive market, so many fans with disposable incomes, and just so much fever for motor racing over there, I think. And like I say, it's a new track. Conrad, I wonder if the Seoul E-Prix is maybe part of a long game Formula E are playing to try and get the likes of Hyundai and Kia in there. And also, do you think that Formula E needs South Korea? And are you excited about this new race?
I'm definitely excited about it. I don't know if it's a ploy to try and get South Korean manufacturers into Formula E. It could well be. Quite possibly, because Hyundai and Kia aren't what they were 20 years ago when they were unfairly seen as laughingstock companies. They're definitely a force to be reckoned with nowadays, and both are pushing for electric technologies, as we've seen with the iconic Hyundai's version of the Toyota Prius and Kia's Niro, the hybrid SUV, or I think they have an electric variant out, but yeah. Who knows? I think it's great to see racing in South Korea. We had the Grand Prix circuit from 2010 to 2013, and what Seoul does right is having it in a city that's already built. Because the story behind the Grand Prix circuit in Formula 1 and why it was such a failure is that the plan was they'd actually build a city around the circuit. The circuit would be made first. That didn't succeed. It was in the middle of nowhere. Fans weren't turning up because it just wasn't logistically suitable. And then people were thinking, is open wheel racing and Formula racing really that popular in South Korea? It definitely will be, I reckon. Especially in a place like Seoul where plenty of people will be able to come to visit and it'll be on their doorstep. I don't think that South Korea has an issue with attaching themselves to racing, and I'll be glad to see their support be validated.
Yeah, and it'll certainly be interesting to see. It's great to see a new country joining Formula E as well. Dean, we've all talked about Tempelhof. It was the site of my first Formula E race 4 weeks ago, and I'm massively excited to see it stay on the calendar. Would you say it's the best circuit on the calendar?
Oh, I think, in my biased opinion, yes. Yeah.
Okay, why?
I love turn one. I love that it can be more than a couple of cars wide. I love the amount of overtaking. I love that it's a speed track in sections. It's got everything really. It's got got quite a few late braking corners as well. It just seems to me like a great track, and for me that's my favourite. I mean, it's not going to be everyone's, but yeah, love it.
Yeah, Conrad, what do you like about the Tempelhof circuit?
I think it's fairly unique. I like the fact that it's, as has been said, it's in an airport area, so you can create it in almost any style you want, really, as like it can grow with Formula E cars as they progress. And although I was actually having a conversation on Twitter a little earlier, I don't like the aesthetic of the track. I think it's quite ugly. The racing is incredibly brilliant there, and looks don't matter. It's definitely worth keeping on the calendar because it's not just a fixed circuit; it can grow if needs be. And again, that's as close as Formula E can get to having an iconic circuit, one that can be remembered over multiple years. So carrying on that trend, and 2 or 3 main events that people can remember from years ago that are still going on, can add validation to the series and make it more appealing to a casual viewer who can point at a certain track and go, I remember that, at the team and go, I remember that. We've already got drivers that are bedded into the series, so they can already do that with the drivers. And yeah, I think Berlin's an incredible place to have a Grand Prix. I mean, E-Prix.
Yeah,
E-Prix.
Yeah, indeed. It's actually kind of good that we now have circuits that have such history in Formula E that we can talk about the folklore of them. That perhaps wasn't something that we necessarily thought we'd get to, because it wasn't clear Formula E would last until Season 5. But these circuits with a lot of experience behind them, we now can talk about, remember that time when that classic thing happened? And I think Berlin is one of those, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's good that the series can have those sort of iconic memories in the fans' mind as well, and obviously that creates nostalgia and some people that may have dropped off watching it might tune in for that particular race and pick it back up. And yeah, we just want more fans watching the series. We want more eyes on the TV screen and at the races. So it's only a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, round 12, New York City Prix, not a double-header this time, because that honour goes to London. I mean, Conrad, how much do you think the New York City doubleheader has been a boon to Formula E, and what's the racing been like over the seasons, in your opinion?
It's a great place to have a doubleheader. It's a great place to have a circuit entirely. Obviously, you need an event in America these days in almost any series. Obviously, not ones that are geo-locked like Super Formula, so. But America's an important nut to crack, and I think that we'll have another good race there. It's not had the best races. I think some of them have been, I don't want to discredit them, but jumped up a little bit by the title fights that have gone on there rather than the actual event itself. Season 4 was definitely exciting, though, I have to say. And I think it's great to have a race in New York. It's just so essential to get America on board with Formula E, like Formula 1 are so desperate to do by having multiple American races there. I think I'd also like to see a second race in America, maybe make use of... I'm trying to think of regions that would be best suited, but possibly San Francisco, if possible. That would be incredibly cool if you could have one there, although it would probably be quite tricky.
Well, I mean, the regen going down those hills in San Francisco would be something else, wouldn't it? Dean, are there any other American cities that you would like to see on the Formula E calendar?
I think San Fran's a good shout. I mean, there's a track that Formula One have sort of talked about in Miami. Perfect. Yeah, would love it.
It definitely looks
Miami. Yeah, I mean, why not have a look at that as well? Especially if Formula One doesn't take it up.
Yeah, but I know that rather than America, the thing you're interested in is the potential of an Auckland E-Prix. It was talked up by a few fans this season. Obviously, if we do get eventually the Brendan along with Brendan Hartley along with Mitch Evans, then it would almost become a must to have an E-Prix in New Zealand. But what do you think the chances are, Dean, of getting a home E-Prix?
I don't think they're very good, unfortunately. I think, Phil Goff, the mayor of Auckland, I think he would be open to it, but I still can't really see it. And even if Brendan Hartley does get the Porsche drive, I don't know whether he will now with the clashes with Wick and he's replacing Fernando Alonso at Toyota. There's so much that's not looking like he'll get the drive at the moment, but I would absolutely die if that was the case. There would be nothing stopping me getting there, basically. Yeah.
It just seems like, I mean, from what I know about the city, which is, again, only from travelling on TV, it seems like the kind of city where Formula E would fit like a glove. It's not a massive city. It's not like a sprawling metropolis, but it's big enough to support good crowds. Easy to get around, good transport links, good infrastructure, and everyone loves New Zealand. It's got this great international image as well, so I can see plenty of reasons why people would like it. But if you're saying the chances are low, then I guess we might have to wait until season 9 or 10 to shout about it again, unfortunately. Yeah,
I think it is pretty low, but New Zealand does have a good clean green image that Formula E probably has looked at. There's various parades and things that happen in Auckland, and it does have the space in different sections. I haven't spent a lot of time in Auckland, but it's definitely, if it was going to be anywhere, it could be Christchurch as well. Christchurch is very grid pattern, and you could create a good central city race. I mean, with all the construction and stuff, obviously from the earthquake years ago, there's a lot of work going on in there, so they probably wouldn't look at that. Wellington is a bit cramped. I don't think they could hold one, the capital of New Zealand. So yeah, Dunedin is another one down south, but it's probably not one of the most sought after places on the planet, unfortunately. And
isn't Dunedin sort of next stop South Pole?
Well, Invercargill is Bluff is the lowest, but it's sort of they're probably not seen as one of the premier cities. So if it was going to be anywhere, it probably would be Auckland.
New York City we've talked about, but the last round, it's a new race, the London E-Prix. We have been to Battersea Park before, and we're back in London. This time it's at the Royal Docks and the XL Centre. Many firsts here. It's Formula E's first race with an indoor home straight. It's Formula E's first race at an exhibition centre, and it's also Formula E's first race in East London. So Conrad, obviously the Brits following Formula E are really stoked about this, but if you look at the circuit in particular, are you happy that it goes slightly indoors? Do you like the ingenuity of it?
I'm definitely happy about it because, again, it's something new. We've had racing in an airport. We've had, we will have a night race. I think it's only natural that Formula E tries to do something that even Formula One hasn't done before, which is have an indoor section that they race in. That should be quite interesting. I've got high hopes for the London race and the doubleheader. I'm sure they can make a very good event out of it, and it always helps being the last race, because in Formula E, titles almost always go down to the wire, even into the last race, and that'll obviously help it make it a lot more exciting wherever you are. But in London, it'll definitely have that benefit. So I'm certainly looking forward to it.
Yeah, Dean, you said that you're hoping to come to London as soon as the tickets come out. You're going to get some, get one for yourself. But what is it that excites you about the circuit at the XL, and do you think it'll get a better reception than Battersea?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I think for me as well, having it as a double header, you have the opportunity to have a seat in the XL Centre, in the indoor section, and then one outside. So you get to see a couple of perspectives. I'm not sure how the seating works or anything, but yeah, I think that's really cool, and you can experience it sort of from more than one angle. And for me, going such a long way, it's awesome that it's a double header as well, because it's, the cost is horrendous. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing the drivers. I'm looking forward to just the differences between the indoor-outdoor flow and how that works and how they can incorporate that. I don't know the area very well, but yeah, it'll be great, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, Conrad, you perhaps know the area better than either of us. You're not from London, but you spent time down there. Can you describe the Docklands area for people who've not been there?
I've not actually been to that part, so I wouldn't know. Anytime that I've been around London, it's been heavily in the city. It's been in places like Stratford, so I actually don't have a clue about that. But from what I've seen, especially when Hazel's walked around there, because I'm incredibly thankful she did a series of videos on Twitter where she showed us around those areas. It seems like a decent place to hold a track. It's a decent aesthetic. I reckon people can get with it and see it'll be enjoyable. It'll be enjoyable for them. But I can't really speculate on what the logistics are going to be and how easy it is going to be to get with the area.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the proximity to London City Airport and the Docklands Light Railway is going to really help. The XL Centre gets a lot of shows just because it's much easier to get to than the Birmingham NEC, for example, and it's much newer as well, and it's fully convertible. So I think there's lots of reasons to be excited for the London Formula E race, but. Looking well ahead, I did an article earlier in the season about unbelievable circuits I thought Formula E must consider, and a few of them were in jest. I don't think they're ever going to come to Palnu in South Estonia. I think that they would need to go well into the summer to go to Tromsø in northern Norway, but I'd love to see Italian E-Prix. It's pretty much my home circuit these days, if they did, and... There's certainly an interesting port development coming up there. I was joking today on Twitter that they're doing some building work on the home straight. So so they must have inked a contract for later on. But let's start with Dean. Auckland we've talked about, but are there any other places that you think would really benefit from a Formula E race, or somewhere where you'd just love to see one?
Adelaide, South Australia as well. That would be cool.
Oh gosh, you mean bringing back the old Formula One circuit?
I do, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yep, that would be amazing. Yeah, so that would be one I would look forward to. And obviously, again, close to me, especially, you'd probably get some people tuning in as well that are Formula One fans, just because of where it is as well. So I think it should be looked at. Formula E, if you're listening, there you go.
Also, Adelaide, am I right that the same circuit continues to host supercars?
Yes, it does. Yep, it's on the calendar still, I think, Adelaide. Yep.
So there's really no logistical problem with continuing to use the circuit only for Formula E, I guess. Cool. Conrad, any fantasy circuits you'd love to see?
I'd love to see Formula E go to Japan, Tokyo in particular, and also I'd like to see it go to Australia or New Zealand. I think that would be a very interesting venture. Just trying to think of wherever else. Romania, possibly. A bit more of Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
Russia,
I mean,
possible.
There are lots of people who'd love to see an Eastern or Central European E-Prix. Bucharest certainly has some iconic buildings for the wrong reason from the Ceausescu era that maybe need that kind of stamp of modern day approval that a Formula E race would give it. So yeah, good shout, I would say. Dean, you're probably looking forward to a Japanese race whenever that happens, simply because it's easier to hop over to from New Zealand. Yeah,
I've been there before. I did some travelling there as a younger, a student, I guess. And it's a great place. The people are welcoming. Japanese manufacturer, Nissan, obviously. I think it would be great. I would absolutely love to see it. It's an iconic city as well, Tokyo. I think the people would tune in to see it. And yeah, again, I would try and get there. Knowing a little bit of Japanese, it wouldn't be too hard.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, I think we've covered most of the main points for this podcast. Before we get on to what Conrad's written most recently, Dean, I'm imagining most of the people listening to this already know you and already listen to your show. But for those who don't, what can we find if we listen to Regen E-Racing, and what do you try to do in your show?
Right, so my show, back in the day, we've been going about a year now. It was with my brother-in-law, Nathan, and we're just, two Kiwi fans that decided to create a show because we found out that each other watched it. So it was very much off the cuff, and it was at a place where we both loved it, but we're not journalists. We didn't know much about it, and really just tried to make it fun. But now, this season especially, I've got Chris Soulsby from Motorsport Monday on the show as my co-host, and he's a wealth of knowledge a journalist, and so you've got me on one hand, not having gone to a race, but really passionate about it. But we've also got the technical analysis and the inner workings of the drivers and those sort of things. So it's really morphed into a really cool show, and something I'm really proud of. So if you go to www.regenracingpodcast.com, that'll give you all the places to subscribe and a little bit about the show.
That's fantastic. And what's your Twitter handle for Regen?
It's at Regen Racing.
Cool. Yeah, Chris Soulsby, absolute mine of information. I was amazed when I heard what his age was, because he seems like someone who's been around watching Formula One since a long time ago, but definitely knows his history. I'd say this is a perfect example of something we talked about in a previous podcast, which is the line is blurring between journalist and blogger and fan, and I think so many fans know so much stuff now that actually it's kind of wrong when the old schoolers say that you've got journalists on one side and fans on the other. I think you can be both. I mean, would you still argue that you're not a journalist, or is that something that you might aspire to be if you don't consider yourself to be one?
Well, I don't put out any articles, so that's one thing. But I mean, I could. Yeah, there's and that's one of the good things, is that there's nothing stopping you doing that. I could do it. And I think Formula E is really accessible, but I think having someone like Chris as well on the show, who he's been around for, it's insane that he's that young, is a real sort of, it makes you feel like you can do it as well, and that he's able to go to the races, and hopefully I'll be able to go to the races and experience some different stuff. So, yeah, I'm quietly optimistic that, could in the future, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's definitely the message that you guys and other people have given me this season, that anyone can do anything they want to if they take on the knowledge and try hard. Conrad, what can we expect from you? What have you written recently, and what are you writing about in the future?
I've not been quite as productive as I'd like, and unfortunately the Formula E content has gone quite slim, so I'm still trying to piece things together. It's writer's block right now. But I do have a couple of pieces up on my Medium account and with Pit Crew Online. I did a piece on the Lotus 49 and why I thought it is the most important Formula One car of all time. I also wrote a piece about why Monaco should be dropped from the Formula One calendar, so it's basically been F1 related content. I'm piecing together a Le Mans 24 hours piece that focuses on the Formula E drivers in the event as we speak, and I've also got a couple of ideas for articles. One about what was the idea now? About the purist problem that Formula E has and how it's managed to overcome that, and possibly one about African representation on the Formula E calendar, which is one that quite interests me because I've been feeling the exact same about Formula One for a while. I feel like the African continent's way too ignored.
And it's a continent where electric mobility perhaps hasn't penetrated to the extent of Asia, for example. So could definitely do with some publicity over there. I know some people are talking about South Africa, but I'd love to see something in somewhere like Nairobi or Lagos. I mean, particularly Lagos. That's a place with an historic pollution problem, and it's also somewhere that is kind of more known for its population size than for anything to do with the city. So it would be really cool to have something there. Any other places in Africa in particular, or were you just thinking about the continent in general?
I was just thinking about the continent in general. Honestly, you could do with a race almost anywhere. Kyalami is going to be out of the question, although I do think Formula One could return there in the next few years. I thought that if we were bringing back circuits, I'd have much rather seen a track like Kyalami than Zandvoort, but maybe that's just me. But I think just holding it in any African city and just letting that continent experience a race, because for such a large and important continent to have such a such a lack of racing is astoundingly bad.
Yeah, I'd agree. All right, guys. Thank you very much for coming on the show. So you can listen to Dean and Chris Soulsby on Regen E-Racing, and you can follow me on eMotion. That is medium.com/e-motion or e_motionfe on Twitter, and you can follow Conrad O'Keefe on eracing.net. And also, what's your Twitter handle, Conrad?
O'Keefe_92.
All right. Although bizarrely, you weren't born in 1992.
No, it's just my favourite number.
Okay, well, fair enough. Guys, thank you so much, and talk to you again soon. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and all good podcast vendors. Thanks again. Goodbye.